Welcome to Project First Line. Thank you for joining us. In this module, we will discuss the 5 elements needed for germs to spread and cause infection, and the 4 most common pathways for germ spread in healthcare. When you understand the elements and pathways, then the infection control actions you do every day make more sense. Throughout this training and in all other Project First Line infection control training modules, the term germ refers to bacteria, fungi, or viruses that are likely to pose challenges to infection prevention and control. Let's begin by understanding how germs spread and lead to illness. Germs are too small to see, but they're everywhere, including in and on our bodies and in the environment. Many of these germs are harmless and even help keep us healthy. Our bodies are very good at protecting against many germs, but when patients in healthcare are weak or ill, their defenses may not work as well. Also, some germs can still cause infection even in someone who's healthy. Infection control keeps germs from spreading and making people sick, and infection control actions are based on recognizing where there are risks for germs to spread. In order for germs to make someone sick, 5 things are needed. At least 5 elements are needed for a germ to spread and cause an infection: a reservoir for the germ to live in, a pathway for the germ to move out of the reservoir, a person to infect, the ability to get around the body's defenses, and the ability for the germ to survive. First, germs need a place to live. We call these places reservoirs. Essentially, they're like habitats. Reservoirs can be in the human body, the skin, the digestive system or gut, the lungs and airway, and the blood. Reservoirs can also be in the environment: water and surfaces that have water on them, dry surfaces like countertops and bed rails, dirt and dust, and devices. Germs need a pathway because they typically can't move on their own, at least not very far. Germs need a way to get from where they live to another place or a person. Germs need a person to infect. That person can be a patient, or you, or one of your colleagues. In order to cause infection, the germs have to get around the body's natural defenses. The body is very good at protecting against many germs, but some germs can break through the body's natural defenses, even in a person who is healthy. Finally, germs need to survive throughout this journey so that they're still able to make someone sick. When the germs are still able to make someone sick, they are infectious. Many germs die quickly after leaving their reservoir, but some can remain infectious for longer. Keep in mind that germs spread and infections can be prevented. Acting on one or more of these 5 elements can keep germs from spreading and keep people from getting infected. That's infection control. Now that we've talked about how germs spread and make people sick, let's talk about how that usually happens in healthcare. In most cases, there are 4 main pathways for germs to be spread from reservoirs in healthcare. The first is through touch. That usually involves the skin, especially the hands, but it also happens with devices, which touch different people and surfaces. Another pathway for germs is through breathing in. The third pathway is through splashes or sprays of blood, body fluid, or water from a sink or other source. Germs in those splashes or sprays can get into a person's eyes, nose, or mouth, or into a cut or a break in their skin and cause infection. And the last common pathway for germ spread in healthcare is through clinical care tasks that bypass or break down the body's natural defenses, like when a patient's skin has to be broken to insert an IV. That creates a pathway for germs to enter the patient's body. Infection control actions at any one of these key points we just discussed can stop germs from spreading and causing infection. To make decisions about infection control, it's important to think about where the germs are, which reservoir or reservoirs you are dealing with, and how the germs might get somewhere else, the pathway. Then you can recognize the risk for germ spread to happen and do something about it. Now that we've talked about how germs spread and cause infection in healthcare, let's imagine a couple scenarios where it could happen. Each scenario starts with a germ and its initial reservoir. Use this information to think of some possibilities for each of the 5 factors of germ spread. We'll walk through the first scenario as an example, and then you'll have the opportunity to create your own scenario. In the end, a patient could be infected with this germ. Of course, there are infection control actions that can keep the germ from spreading, but for now we're focusing on how germs spread and make people sick. It's not necessary to know everything about the germs to do the activity. The point is to think through the elements of how germs can be spread. Let's get started. The germ for scenario 1 is strep, and our reservoir is the skin, a healthcare worker's hand. What is a pathway for the germ to be spread from the hand? Recall the 5 elements of how germs spread and cause infection: reservoirs, pathways, a person, a body's defenses, and survival. The worker could touch the bed rail in a patient's room without cleaning their hands first. The germ is now on the bed rail. From there, how could it get to the patient? The patient could pick up the germ on their hand when they touch the bed rail, if it hasn't been cleaned and disinfected first. The patient could then rub their eye, delivering the germ to their body. The germ survived because the bed rail wasn't cleaned and disinfected, and the patient's natural defenses can't fight it off. The patient now has an infection. Now, the way that I just outlined the 5 elements in this example isn't the only way germ spread could happen. In fact, there are many ways that the elements could work in this scenario for an end result of a patient becoming infected. It's also important to remember that the elements aren't steps in an order, and that it's not inevitable that someone will get sick from a germ. Infection control actions can keep germs from spreading at any point. The reservoir, pathway, the new person to infect, their body's defenses, and the survival of the germ itself. In this scenario, the germ is Pseudomonas and the reservoir is water in a water faucet. Take a few minutes to think of a possible pathway for scenario 2. Write down in your participation booklet how each of the 5 elements could contribute to a patient getting an infection. As you make notes, I encourage you to draw on your work experiences as you're thinking about your story, since these are things that you encounter and react to every day. Keep in mind, it's not necessary to know the details and characteristics of the germ in your scenario. Instead, think about how the framework of the 5 elements and how they work to result in someone getting sick. The 5 elements are displayed on this slide to use as a reminder while you work. A potential pathway for this scenario could be a healthcare worker gives a patient a soap and water bath. The water gets onto the patient's IV and seeps to the head of the IV. The IV is not cleaned immediately and the germ begins to grow. When the IV is reattached, the germ enters the patient's body and infects them. The germ survived because the IV wasn't cleaned and disinfected immediately, and the germ was able to enter the patient's body on the needle of the IV as it breaks the skin, one of the body's defenses. The patient now has an infection. We've covered a substantial amount of information today, so let's take a moment to revisit some key highlights. Understanding how germs spread and make people sick is an important part of recognizing the risk for it to happen and choosing infection control actions that will keep germ spread from happening, which protects your patients and yourself. To make decisions about infection control, it's important to think about where the germs are, which reservoir or reservoirs you are dealing with, and how the germs might get somewhere else, the pathway. When you understand where germs live and how they might be moved from one place to another or to people, you can recognize the risk for it to happen. Everyone, no matter your training or role, can diagnose an infection control problem and recognize an infection control risk. Thank you for your time and attention today. I hope that you can take these ideas and apply them at work. Even though we covered a lot today, there is still much more to learn. You can keep exploring these topics on your own using the resources in this module. Project Firstline has a suite of products to help you learn more about how to recognize infection risks at work, where germs live in healthcare, and how germs spread. You can also follow Project Firstline on social media.